So if you live here in Krakow, you know that every year in May, there's a gay pride parade that takes place, goes through the main square. It's a big deal, actually, a really big deal. It's been taking place every year since 2003. Of course, last year in 2020, because of COVID, it was rescheduled to August. But at that time of year, again, is coming up. And we've got two people here from an organization called Queerowy Maj, or Queer May. And they are the organizers of the parade. And they're going to talk to us about the events itself, and a larger festival around queer culture that's taking place, and just generally about the queer culture scene here in Krakow and throughout the country. Their names are Anya and Patricia. So first of all, welcome to both of you. Thanks for joining us on the KrakCast.
Hello.
All right, so where do we start? First of all, the Gay Pride Parade. I've been here long enough, and I think everybody else, Dr. Mike, Josh, and Gabby have also been here long enough to remember the early days when it was fairly small, but now it's a really, really big deal. I mean, I can remember I was there in 2019, 2 years ago, I guess the last pre-COVID parade, and it was huge, right?
We reached 10,000 people.
10,000. It must be very gratifying to you to look back and see how much it's grown over the last decade or so.
Yes, we are definitely really proud of what we managed to achieve with this.
Let me ask about how each of you, before we kind of go deeper into the events that are taking place around Queerowy Maj, let me ask each of you how you came to be involved with the organization. Kind of what was your first kind of point of contact, and why did you get involved, and how long have you been involved with Queerowy Maj?
Okay, so I'm one of the younger members of Queerowy Maj, and simply my first, point of contact with Queerowy Maj was, I think, even in 2017 or maybe 2016 when I started attending the marches. And the March of 2019, I actually registered to be a volunteer to help to organize the march. And just after the march, I joined the organization. And now I'm a part of it. And come on, Anya.
So I was involved, I think, if I remember correctly, from 2015. So I also started as a volunteer. I just found out about Queer May on Facebook, I guess. And I think I started to get a bit more interested, a bit more engaged. And since then, I'm already like a board member of the organization. So,
We're focusing on the march here because it's the biggest event. Of course, everybody knows the march. There are a lot of related events, smaller events, that kind of altogether constitute the Queer Culture Festival that continues. Actually, this year it's going to be basically across the whole summer. We're going to talk about that in just a second. I want to get one more question about the march in here. It is such a big event. It's a huge event. It involves permits and paperwork like I can't even imagine. Tell us what it's like. I mean, if you want to organize this kind of event in Krakow, what do you have to do? Where do you even start?
So, of course, it depends on the scope and how big such a demonstration or event is. But marches are considered like a general assemblies. So we just need to report that to the city council. But they cannot kind of prevent us from doing it. But, of course, if we think of the march as it is right now, so kind of a huge event, that we want to make it a bit more entertaining for people. So it involves music, artists.
It's very entertaining. I've seen it. Yeah, it's very loud, lots of music. It's not just people walking down the street. No.
Yes, I think you kind of get the idea that the image of marches kind of shifted in the last few years, because previously it was more considered as a demonstration to kind of demonstrate our
existence,
in general, and kind of in this way we are fighting for our rights. But right now we also want to kind of shift this focus towards the community and give them like the most pleasurable event during the year. So that's why we also want to kind of promote the queer artists and our identities.
Do you think it's fair to say that, it is partly demonstration, and as you said, it started out as a demonstration. I would say, and I mean this respectfully, I would say it's kind of more celebration than demonstration, really.
Yes, and I think we organize it right now with that kind of intention. more to celebrate it.
Just one more question, and tell me if I'm wrong here, because you said that the city council, they have, they can't really turn you down. They can't say no exactly unless there's a security threat. I think, as a citizen, you have the right to do this.
Yeah.
Right? And if there are 5 of you or 5,000 of you, you have the right to do it. It's basically the obligation of the city to provide the security and the infrastructure to make it happen. Is that basically the way it is? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. But still, paperwork like you wouldn't imagine, I guess, yeah?
Yeah, of course. And you need to be in contact with the police due to those security measures. You need to think of how to... of course, you're not obliged to do it, but we always take care of our community. So we need to keep them safe. We need to have some number of volunteers that can kind of coordinate the whole people that come to Equality March.
And this year, like last year, and for the same reason, COVID, this year's march is being postponed until August. Is that right?
Yes.
So the same march, just different time on the calendar.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the march, as I mentioned a minute ago, is by far kind of the highest profile event of the whole festival. But in fact, a lot of people don't know this. There are a lot of related events, discussions, exhibits, talks, various things that go on throughout the summertime. And you are starting in May, right? And it's going to go on all summer long. The march is going to be kind of the final, the ending of the whole thing. Tell us what other events you're going to have over the summer, especially what you're going to start with in May.
So we had to kind of spread it over those few months due to COVID, unfortunately. But we still want to, basically, during the festival, we want to promote queer culture. So we definitely will show great works of queer artists. We want to start with discussions. We still want to keep it as a secret who will actually be invited to it.
Oh, the big reveal is coming. Huh?
Yes. So you need to wait at least like a few weeks to know it.
You can just whisper, who is it going to be? You can tell me.
No.
Oh, okay, all right.
It's a secret. Sorry.
All right.
You just need to follow our page.
If you... can you guess, like, approximately, roughly, how many total events are we talking about over the course of the whole summer?
So at least I think we have 5 of them already planned, and we will reach, I guess, 8 or 10 of them throughout the whole 3 months.
And the official starting date is what, May 17th?
May 17th. That's actually a very important date
because
it's Idaho Bit, and that's an international day of how to say that?
Something to do with the gay community worldwide?
Yes. It's the day to kind of acknowledge the homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia that affects our community. And we want to emphasize this, the kind of the burden that our community has and how to fight it.
So that's kind of that's the theme of a lot of the presentations and events that you're organizing?
Yeah, we always start with it. But of course, besides just raising awareness, we want to also build our own identity during the festival. So we not only want to organize those events just for people to get to know the queer culture, but also for just the community to kind of embrace their identity and celebrate it.
Before I turn things over to the room here with Dr. Mike and Josh and Gabby, I got one more question for you. Going back to the march, I'm curious about something. And there's no specific correct answer to this. I'm just wondering what your guess is. When I was at the march 2 years ago, I could see that a lot of the people there were obviously members of the gay community, the queer community. Can I say that?
Yeah.
Okay. But there were also a lot of people, I think you call them allies.
Yeah.
Right? Not necessarily gay or lesbian or queer or anything like that, but sympathetic to the cause, basically. If you had to guess at this march, what portion of the participating crowd would you say are allies of your cause? Again, It's a guess, but I'm just wondering what you think.
I think it's hard to estimate, but
tiny, huge.
I think still
50,
tiny.
50?
I think still tiny.
Okay.
Because what I think personally, I think allies still kind of support the community, but in a kind of individual way, and they are not usually make it very public. So,
I just think there are a lot of people who support your cause who are not themselves gay or lesbian.
Yeah.
Right? And I think they would, I recall seeing quite a lot of corporate support during the parade as well.
Maybe
and this
not
is
exactly in Krakow, but
no?
yeah, I think it keeps growing.
Oh, and one more thing. I keep saying one more thing. You mentioned Krakow. Before we started recording, you told me, I'm really surprised by this, you told me that while the Pride March itself in Krakow is maybe not the nation's biggest, the one in Warsaw is probably bigger, taken together, all of the events around Queerowy Maj, or Queer May, are probably the largest queer culture event in the country.
Yes.
And I find that interesting. Is there something? Is Warsaw just kind of too lazy, or because they've got so many more people, you would think that they would be able to beat us? But is there some explanation for Krakow being kind of the epicenter of so much energy around these issues?
I don't think so. I think our focus is just on a bit different kind of place. I think Warsaw is more focused on a parade, and it's really huge, right? You can't compare it with Krakow still. You had in 2019, you had more than 40,000 people in Warsaw.
Really big, yeah.
So it's 4 times as much as in Krakow. But I think our focus is more on a culture itself than on the pride, and kind of just showing ourselves to society. So the focus is just different.
Yeah, I also think the big part of it is building the community, which is not as big, I think, as in Warsaw. Yeah. I think we just put a bigger emphasis on it, which is personally very important to me.
What do you mean? The Krakow, there's just more enthusiasm and support for the cause in Krakow for some reason?
No, I just think that it's a little bit more local in its I don't know, its character is just a little bit more local. We're not centering on, one huge big event, but more on small events that can really bring the community together and make just the queer people locally stronger and maybe more confident of themselves and aware of their own roots, culture, just their existence, actually.
Let's do something that I've promised to do twice already now. Bring in everybody else. And also, I just want to say, we're also going to... One more thing. We're going to expand kind of the scope of the conversation. Both of you, as members of this community, can kind of maybe speak to some things in a way that maybe other guests we've had can't. And we're curious to get your thoughts on a few things. So we're going to go bigger picture as well. Some of the issues that we talk about here on our show, we've talked about in the past. The whole queer culture has just become it's a much higher profile now in Poland than it was even 5 years ago, right? It's in the news a lot more often, and we want to talk about some of these issues as well. So I'll finally throw it open to whoever wants to jump in front of the microphone now. Go ahead.
All right, maybe I'll be the
Dr.
first
Mike.
one here, yeah. Because I remember these marches from back the mid-2000s. I used to participate back then, but I also remember them kind of being different. Back then, the main name of them was Parada Równości. And at least this is my impression, that back then, it incorporated a lot more other groups of people, ethnic minorities, foreigners, disabled people, and that was the way it was sold to me or presented to me, that it was basically a lot of people going out there to demonstrate that they're part of society here in Poland without necessarily being the just stereotypical kind of Polish person. I mean, I see myself as being Polish, but a lot of other things as well. And I, went to a couple of these marches over, several years, and
is there a question in our future?
Is am I right in thinking that maybe the focus of the Parada Równości started off first not as the quote-unquote pride parade, but that was only part of it, and it shifted towards that over the years? Because now, especially since after 2000, I want to say 10, 12 or so, it seems to be only based on that. Because I remember going there and getting leaflets from the Green Party and say other associations, but now it seems to be all LGBT plus, etc.
I'm going to have to step in here. Okay.
Yeah,
ladies, take the question.
I needed some setup there.
Okay. So
lot of setup.
maybe I can just give my answer, how I see it. I think we always try to be very inclusive. So I don't think we are kind of shifted our focus just on LGBTQIA people. It's just more of them are actually attending the marches right now. Because like during this mid-2000s, they were just too afraid to come out, to actually be attending those marches. And right now they are way more self-confident and way more willing to actually come out and just being more in public spaces.
Is there anybody, I mean, to Dr. Maj's question about kind of who participates and who doesn't, is there any limit as to who cannot participate in the march? Is everybody welcome?
Everybody is welcome.
What if they have a different cause that isn't necessarily aligned exactly with the queer culture cause? If it's, I don't know, if it's Free Palestine, it's Save Tibet, it's something, can they participate?
They are always welcome.
Okay.
All right, and
the only, maybe just to make it clear, the only thing that we don't accept is intolerance. So
you do not tolerate intolerance.
Yeah.
That's the going to.
That's correct.
So I just wanted, because this phrase has been going around a bit, could you say broadly define what you mean when you say queer culture? Because, usually when people think of the word, well, now anyway, when they say the word queer, it's usually more about sexual orientation or disposition or preferences or whatever the term is right now, or what somebody likes. But how does that translate into, say, a kind of culture, though? Especially since, these are very different people from different backgrounds, different lifestyles, different dispositions, but they're being put into like one single culture. How does that work?
It's important to remember that the queer culture is actually an umbrella term. An umbrella term that is important because actually the queer culture has many different roots, right? It just sprout out in many different countries, and then it has been put under the one umbrella of all the queer people that realize that this is their heritage. And usually actually the queer cultures, sprouted from different minority groups, right? When we are thinking about, for example, very popular nowadays, like the voguing scene and everything, like the drag queens, it all began in United States, in mostly New York or similar cities. And those people who were demonstrating and creating the culture weren't only, queer. They were also often a part of like ethnic minority groups. They were also often people who were like an economic minority, right? And the culture gave them actually a sense of belonging and a sense of being able to do anything with their life what they feel like it. And what I think it's important to remember when we are talking about queer culture in Poland is that unfortunately, fortunately, I don't know, it's neither a bad or a good thing. It's just the fact that we are not as diverse as the United States, obviously. We don't have such strong minority groups on a base of their ethnicity or anything. Therefore, our marches, our pride culture, the one in Poland, is obviously mostly dominated by queer people in the meaning of people who are either trans, non-binary, or just simply like, gay, bisexual, etc. But what is also important that, especially in current discourse, which has shifted, especially the political discourse has shifted to like, I don't know, restricting women's reproductive rights or like people's uteruses reproductive rights. We are very, very, let's say, connected to the feminist movement, and we are also speaking about the needs of it. Also, like underlining the needs of people who, let's say, are non-binary or who are not women, but who do need those reproductive rights, who are often being pushed out of the discourse. So yeah, I believe that's also important to remember. Before we even started recording, we were also talking about this like shelter place for queer young people who are just kicked out of the home and they have nowhere to go, which are also being organized all over the Poland. So yeah, when you're mentioning queer culture, it's not that simple, it's not that easy to define it, but we are very much aware of the needs of our community and how diverse it is in many different ways. So yeah, I hope this answers your questions in a good way, yeah?
Very good.
Okay, so I'm going to put my feet into the lion's den now, and I think that something that kind of nags at me a little bit, sometimes in a way that is a bit annoying, and sometimes in a way that's like genuinely I would prefer to know better, and that is that actually it's a baffling field of all these different kind of cultures and subcultures. Plus, it can seem sometimes in today's climate that it's very easy, either accidentally or, of course, sometimes deliberately, by trying to say or describe in the right way, say the right thing, and you actually say completely the wrong thing, or you end up with a.
Jump in again here, Josh. Come on. Bottom line question is here.
Well, no, but I mean the question is really.
You're like the police in this episode. Sorry.
Are you done interrupting?
Yeah, I am done. I'm done. I'm doing the Dave thing here, but yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, I'm not sure how clear it was made. We've got the kind of umbrella term queer culture, which I think is one that we can be more or less kind of comfortable with. But, I mean, how do you feel about the difference between when people are obviously being deliberately offensive in terms of the language they choose, and when people are just not getting it right because it's too complicated?
Or don't care. That's another thing, sure.
Is that a clear question? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's all about like the attitude. Like if you mean to be offensive, then of course we will be offended, right?
Yeah. But we also realize like there is no proper sexual education in Polish schools. Therefore, many people, although they want to be supportive, they just don't know how, and they can make some mistakes, and they make them. And it's not like we're going to attack them because of that. It's just be respectful, and that's the simplest rule can be, right? Because let's say I have a quite wide knowledge in the field of queer studies compared to many different people who, let's say, are my age or similar age. Therefore, I'm very welcome to introduce someone to different topics and just simply educate them if they're interested in it. But, if they're respectful and if they want to listen. So I think it's the most important rule, I guess, yeah.
I think we don't expect people to know everything about queer culture, because I think still when it comes to our community, sometimes we don't know very specific things about ourselves either. So it's just about being open-minded and willing to get to know it.
Yeah. That's why we actually
that's okay.
Organize all of those events, right? Because most of our events are not for, let's say, experts in the culture who know everything. Right. Yeah, we just, let's say, get in touch with different activists from other cities who can say about the organization, what they do, and also talk about issues of the community to just, educate others. So that's, I think, it's like even one of, let's say, our main goals. Bring the knowledge, because we know that not everyone has it.
I'm happy to say that Gabby has found her voice.
Okay, so you mentioned about queer studies and queer theory and stuff like that. Can you tell the listeners a little bit more about what queer studies and queer theory entails, and what maybe the philosophy and the goals of it are?
Okay, so I actually mentioned it, and it's actually hard for me to answer the question, because what is the philosophy of just such studies, right?
Oh, we're getting deep here, very deep.
You can say that, I'm a little bit interested in it as a sociology student, and it's a thing I just explore in university, right? And the point of studying it is just to simply understand the community, understand it to the best way possible, and also it's actually an important notion when we are talking about any minority groups, is how they were pushed out of the history of the mainstream culture and everything. So we as researchers, we as students, we're just trying the best we can to, dig up the history, bring it to the light, and actually give space to the minority groups that have been, kicked out of the discourse.
So you talk a lot about discourse, of course.
Sure.
Sorry, adjusting my face so it's in front of the microphone. You talk about discourse a lot. What's the connection between discourse and queerness?
Oh my god! What's the connection between discourse and queerness? I mean, queerness is, let's say, a part of our identity, right? And when we are talking about discourse, we are talking about things that are, to put it the simplest way, are being let's say, discussed in the public or a certain, I don't know, niche, if we are talking about like niche discourses. But the thing is, when our identities are being completely forgotten, or our rights are being completely forgotten, or just our existence, oh my God, I have to speak to the microphone. I forget about it all the time. It's very hard for me to, talk to a person, answer the question, and look at him.
This is what it's like in the world of big-time podcasting.
Don't think of John as a person.
Don't think of me as a person at all.
We just don't look at John
Just talk to the microphone.
Okay, but yeah, I lost my,
Yeah, I'm trying to think of an intelligent question to be part of this conversation.
Maybe I can jump in here then with a bit of a question with my typical setup. I'll
call back in 5 minutes.
This is a series of events. This is a whole festival that will be lasting, over a month. So my question is, you'll be presenting yourselves to the public in general here. And what kind of goals do you have with that, when it comes to what do you want the public to pick up from all of this? Or you're talking about rights. Well, what kind of rights do you feel are being infringed? And what kind of changes would you like to be brought in or introduced? What are the goals or the expectations of having this kind of festival and these kind of events?
I think our basic problem is always discrimination. So we are way more discriminated in comparison to other communities in terms of school, work, workplaces, I think everything, even when it comes to public media everywhere. So I think our goal is mainly to raise awareness about we exist and that it's just kind of our identity is just another one in comparison to heterosexual and cisgender norm, and that it's still normal. We're just a minority. So that's one thing. The other thing is that we want to be included in the public narrative, so we are not totally erased. And I think that's our goal, to kind of push ourselves more into the mainstream culture and to find our place in it.
Well, when will you know that you've been successful in that? I mean, are there any points that you say okay, this has happened, this means that we've been successful with our general goals or ideas? Do you have any, say, goals that you want to hit specifically, though, that that you've succeeded?
I think, for example, one is, of course, media coverage, and we kind of start to reach it, especially when it comes to those last several years. But of course, the other thing are also, of course, legal issues. That are still very problematic, but we know we can't expect it to change over the next few years with our government. But still, we are kind of advocating for our rights. We are monitoring the situation in public institutions, for example.
But what kind of rights?
There are actually a lot of, I mean, obviously, there are those things being discussed all over the world, like marriage rights or adoption rights. But what is also important to remember that Polish law does not really disclose hate discrimination based on gender and on sexual orientation. Therefore, we had so many problems in Poland with, for example, those extremist Catholic right-wing organizations simply putting, billboards or just anything when they are talking that, queer people are pedophiles, etc. And they cannot get, let's say, sued for it because the Polish law does not really even, as I mentioned, think that this is a bad thing, I mean, this is just their opinion and they are allowed to include it whenever they want, in the public sphere. So this is one of the most important things, I believe. But additionally to what Anya mentioned, about the press coverage, etc. What is also important is that some of the things we want to achieve are just not so easy to measure, right? It's like with all of the social movements. When you want to bring actual social change in people's cognitions, it's not that easy to do it. It's not that easy to measure it. I mean, it's not easy to do it. That's one thing, but it's not easy to measure it. And one, I think, very important thing is that right now, queer people in Poland are often being, just put in this one drawer, which is called LGBT. And it's like, they're talking about the LGBT as an institution or as an ideology, etc. And we just want to be acknowledged as people who are diverse and who may have different goals, different opinions, and, who are just people and not some weird, scary pedophiles who want to hurt your children. No, I don't want to.
I'm looking at both Anya and Patricia sitting with us now. Neither of them looks really weird or scary at all.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I just wanted to point that out.
Unlike you, John.
Yeah, unlike me. Thank you. Let me bring this back to the world of politics. I know you mentioned the current government. Patricia, earlier you mentioned political discourse and whatnot. And ultimately, this is a political issue. I got to put the question to you. You mentioned the current government is not sympathetic to your cause generally. I think it's mostly true. I don't think we can argue with that. However, I have to say that, 6-8 months ago during the presidential election, when Mr. Trzaskowski narrowly lost the election, he was probably, he's more on the left side of the political spectrum. He's most likely to be your champion. And yet, Patricia's shaking her head, and yet not a word about support for the kind of agenda that you would like to see him implement into politics, right? And this is the guy that comes from the left. So if he won't support your agenda, do you feel that the queer culture, the queer community in Poland has any voice at the top level of politics if even the opposition to the current government does not support your position?
Can you just get one thing straight?
Sure.
He's not a left politician, okay? He is a liberal, even more like right-wing liberal, okay?
Right-wing liberal, that's what?
liberal
American
economics.
John.
Okay.
This is not a left-wing
Okay, then let me cut you off there. Even Robert Biedron, his party's, Wiosna, he's Lewica, he's gay himself. Yeah. And he was not standing at the podium at the microphone saying, I want these things for the gay community in Poland. If even he's not willing to say it, that must be, must make you feel like, again, you have no voice at the highest level of politics.
Yes, that's why we're advocating for our rights.
So why isn't he? Not to pick on Robert Biedron, not to pick on him.
I can.
But, okay, then you pick on him. So, why isn't anybody taking up this cause? If it really has this popular support and if it's really, a political winner, why isn't somebody, again, getting behind it?
I think what is important to remember when we are talking about people like Robert Biedroń, let's say, although he's gay, he's also a wealthy person and he's also a cis person. And therefore he does not understand many issues we have. This is also why it's so important for us to build community locally. Because we, as normal people, can indeed understand problems of our community and we can help it on like a local level. And it's hard for us to get into mainstream politics while also not being put in the drawer I was talking about later, right? About not being seen as these, 4 letters and scary people. It's just really hard. And what I think is also important, I just sometimes feel like the topic of our existence has been used as a scapegoat many times, especially with last presidential election. Our problems were not really being discussed. We were rather being discussed as a problem, as a very loud and strong group that can be a problem, while we're not. We're just simply not. And I hope that answers your question quite well. I don't know.
I think we can't consider queer people or LGBTQIA people as popular.
That was loud, Patricia. I heard that. She was concerned about drinking loud on the microphone. She just did. Anyway, sorry to interrupt, Anya.
No, I don't think we can consider LGBT community as a kind of popular agenda. I don't think so. I think still, if you actually just put it out as one of the things that you really care about, you will actually lose many votes still in Poland. So that's unfortunate, but that's how it is. I'm going to push
you a little bit harder because over the course of our interview, I see that both of you are more than capable of punching back. So that's okay, and that's okay. A couple of devil's advocate questions. You know what I mean by devil's advocate, okay? So somebody earlier mentioned, for example, New York and the gay scene there. And, let's talk about San Francisco, New York, London, Berlin, Paris. what the gay scene might be like there, why do we have to assume that Poland, with its own culture, should produce and celebrate and maybe tolerate the same gay scene that we see in those cities? Why can't we say that Poland is just simply different, and what works in Berlin or Paris or San Francisco doesn't necessarily work here? Why can't we acknowledge that?
I don't think it's about that we want the same. We want something similar, but of course, kind of taking into account our Polish culture. It's just we want to be seen, we want to be accepted in a society. We want to build our own scene here, but we are not allowed. And that's the problem.
Yeah, I also what is important to mention that when we are talking about all these big cities and big countries, they have their own like queer icons, right? There are those people that we all know, okay, and they're being celebrated in those countries. And simply because we don't have that many queer icons in Poland, or those icons are not well known, we often, as a community, and I'm talking not on behalf of only myself, but also it's like a notion I've been seeing in like the queer movements or like these queer people, we are taking those, you know, those icons, those people, and their like ideas and their culture, because we often don't really have ours, or we don't even know our culture. And what I think is really important in that context is that, yeah, for the last few years, we've been trying to not only establish our culture, but also talk about it loudly and with pride. Because, yeah, we even have some, like, I don't know, classic writers that are being read in high school, in primary school even, that one has to know to, you know, write those, like, obligatory exams at the end of the education.
Okay, Patricia, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just, if Poland doesn't have, for example, a drag queen scene, like London, wait a second, like London does, for example, or Berlin does that mean there's something wrong with Polish society?
No, I don't think so. And just, you know, our scene is growing a little bit slower because, you know, if you know just a little bit of Polish history, you know that we are not able to establish such a strong queer culture, let's say in the 80s or in the 70s or in the 90s. You know why?
They've had decades a head start, basically.
Yeah, we just had like a late start, and yeah, the drag queen scene and everything is growing so strong now.
One more devil's advocate question. Yeah. I got to ask this, and this is like a Dr. Mike type introduction here, so bear with me for a second here. And this is something that plenty of people, I think, observers have asked themselves. And I'm going to put this question to you. And maybe it's not fair, but I'm going to put the question to you anyway, because, again, both of you are more than capable of punching back, which I've seen. Very good. Here's my question. We've talked to other people on our show before, especially about the abortion debate, who tell us that the way to change the law is to change the culture. They don't go to the government asking to change anything. They change the culture, and then the culture changes the law, basically. And I think that's kind of the long-term strategy for the gay community as well. Right, you know, in Poland, what do you say? The average Kowalski, right? You know, just to change. If you change his mind, then the broader culture will change and the laws will change, right? So if the average Kowalski embraces or at least tolerates the LGBT agenda, then things will change, right? When I was at the 2019 Pride Parade here in Krakow, I saw things that maybe the average Kowalski would not be impressed by. Let's say, right? Do you think some of the more extreme elements of the queer community kind of work against themselves by failing to connect with the average Kowalski?
Okay, two things. Yeah. One thing, I don't really believe that we need to choose. We should both just raise the awareness and advocate, like talking with politics and so on. We don't need to choose just one option here.
No, of course not.
And we don't want to. And the second thing is we as organizations and we as a part of the community, we can't be responsible for other people in the community and how they want to show themselves to the public, right? You're not responsible for other cis heterosexual men.
Can't be judged by the most extreme elements.
Drinking, for example, right?
Yeah,
so how come we should be responsible for other people in our community?
Okay, fair enough. Patricia, you have an input on this?
Yeah, okay. I also think it's important to remember that What we also, mentioned before, our march, our festival and everything, it's first and foremost for the community. So we are not going to also like cover some parts of the community that can be seen as controversial by the average Kowalski, because the community and what they represent, if it's not hurting everyone, if it's not offensive, anything, we should just take it as a part of it. And when we are talking about minority groups, something always will be not good with it. In the majority group, it's always like that. There will always be a problem. And
sorry, but you can't expect us to be perfect.
Yeah, and we just can't. But there will always be a problem, right? Therefore, I think.
Let me go back to something Dr. Mike kind of mentioned earlier. Kind of similar question. Okay, tomorrow, Monday morning, you guys wake up and you are co-presidents of Poland. You also control the legislature. You have total power. You two.
That's a dream.
You two. What are the top 1, 2, 3 things you can do politically, legally, to improve the lives of gay and lesbian people in Poland immediately? What would you do?
I think first acknowledge hate crimes based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Of course, legalize gay marriage, adoption, and those are those basic things we want.
If let's take this subject of gay marriage. If it was put to a vote to the Polish people, do you approve, yes or no, and it failed, the Polish people said no, would you respect the result of that election?
But I think you cannot decide on the rights, like civil rights, based on the opinion of the majority of the society. You just can't.
The same response in the abortion debate. Some people say
that's correct.
It's not up to your vote. It's a human right. It's beyond the political realm.
I mean, it gets more complicated when you start talking about what the definition of a right is as well, because it's hard to vote on something as a right or not if both sides don't even agree if it is a right or not to begin with.
So hate crime legislation, gay marriage and adoption. Anything else that could improve the lives of gay people?
Along with what Anya said, I will also add putting emphasis on rights of trans people, because currently transitioning and changing your legal gender, it's a very lengthy and hard and very expensive process in Poland, which is also very hurtful to many people. So it's also important to
and
put
including
emphasis on
very
it.
Disturbing aspects. For example, if you want to change your gender that was assigned to you at birth, like legal gender, you need to sue your parents in Poland.
You need to do what?
Sue your parents.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I mean, you have to...
Because why?
I mean, you have to sue your parents because they are seen by the law as responsible for wrongly assuming your gender when you were born. So yeah, you have to sue them. And if your parents are not alive, you have to sue anyone.
The classic efficiency for which the Polish judicial system is famous, yes.
Yeah.
Quick question, Anya. I think I know the answer to this already, but you mentioned gay marriage. Am I right when I say that the Polish government does not recognize gay marriage licenses issued by other countries?
Yes. So
you're married in some, I don't know, whatever country, and they come here and what? You're not married. Right?
It's just not respected by our government.
Is there must be an EU law. Let's say somebody's has some gay marriage from, I don't know, Holland or something, and they come here. There's no EU word on this?
There was actually one case that somehow resolved it. It was actually an EU case. But to be quite frankly, it is very complicated. And oftentimes when queer couples from different countries wanted to either move to Poland and have their marriage acknowledged, or, for example, they were a couple from Poland that moved to another country where, for example, they could adopt the child or have the child recognized as theirs when they are single gender couple, women and women or men and men. They often had many different legal troubles in Poland, and therefore, although they had some EU laws, let's say, backing them up, they still had to have all of those trials and legal problems, etc., etc. Mostly because just the legal system in Poland, as you might have seen on the trans people example, just not suited to the needs, not at all. It's just so troublesome. So when you have cases like this, you just know you have to dig up some different paragraphs, and it's just a mess.
Even though EU has some regulations, Like, it doesn't matter what kind of regulations those are. It doesn't mean that they will be acknowledged in Poland, unfortunately. You need to keep that in mind.
Well, guys, we congratulate you on the huge success of the march, and we thank you very much for coming in today to talk to us. If people listening want to find out more about you guys, about the organization, about the march, any events at all, where should they go?
The best option is to follow our Facebook page and our Instagram, and that's you just need to look for Queerowy Maj. And those are the most up-to-date sources, so we highly invite you to just check that out.
Patricia and Anya from Queerowy Maj, thanks for joining us. We hope you'll come back someday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a drink.